Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I'm the Executive Director with Ikahi Mediation Center. Welcome to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch Series. For those of you who are not as familiar with us, ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center. We serve East Hawaii on Hawaii Island, also known as the Big Island. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit, so we are celebrating 39 years in 2022. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. And to achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and training, like this brown bag, to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you need to register each time on Eventbrite to receive the Zoom link. Other exciting events that we have coming up are our sneak preview. I don't even have it on my website yet. Our basic mediation training, which we hold annually. We're going to be doing that in February of 2023. I'll announce that more, and you'll get emails about it now that you're joined us and are on our email list. Another event is a training called Dynamic Leadership with Sylvia Dolina. It will be Thursday, December 1st, 2022, 8:30 to 4:30 at UH Hilo. I'm going to put a little message and link to sign up for that. If you are here in Hilo and you'd like to join us, please sign up. This is our 5th in a 8-part series we've been doing with Sylvia, who is a leadership and project management type specialist. At the end of this talk, we will ask you to please click into the link in the chat box to fill out our short online survey. It helps with our grant funding for this free series. So we're able to put this on because we have support of Hawaii Island United Way and the County of Hawaii. So please do give us your thoughts. And when I do that, I'll put it in a couple times as we're getting towards the hour. And I will also send out an email later with the video link if you would like to rewatch this video. And it will also have the evaluation link there because some people have told us sometimes they are not able to click into the link in the chat box for some reason. If you do like this talk, please feel free to sign up for more in the future. Our next speaker is on November 17th is Melissa May. And she will be speaking on the topic Preventing and Resolving Conflicts 2, part 2 to today's training, the role of urban planning. And here is the link in the chat box to register for our next brown bag. Without me saying much more about other things, let me please introduce you to our speaker and topic today. Today, we are doing Preventing and Resolving Community Conflicts 1 by designing a culturally sensitive engagement process. Our speaker is Dawn Chang, who is an attorney and principal of Pu'iwalu, a Native Hawaiian woman-owned small business specializing in facilitating contentious and culturally sensitive issues. Dawn holds a JD, MSW, and BA from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She sits on the State Land Use Commission, and she is an arbitrator with the State Court Annexed Arbitration Program, sometimes called CAP. She is a member of Accord 3.0, an affiliation of global mediators and facilitators tackling challenging issues, and she has a very long and illustrious bio that you can find on her website. So please join me in giving a warm Zoom welcome to Dawn.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Mahalo, Julie. Aloha mai kako. I appreciate Julie providing me the opportunity to share some of my experiences and mana'o with you today. Just a kind of a brief overview over this presentation. I know it's short. I'll provide you some background of some information about myself and some experiences. And then I'll provide you some what I call best management practices or tools that you might find helpful. And then I'll open it for questions. But before we begin, this is a video that I use in many other presentations that I do, that it sort of sets the stage for the talk story. So Julie, if you could share that video, I'd appreciate it. The volume's not on for some reason.
I think you need to check your speaker settings.
And it was just working when Julie and I got together a little earlier. I'm not a PowerPoint person, so hopefully this will be.
Okay, pardon me. What you're saying is that you're not able to hear the video. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can't hear. At least I can't hear it.
Okay, let me try again. I'm not sure if it has some kind of interaction because of the recording. Let me try it one more time. Hold on a second and give me a moment while I see if I can
Julie,
fix-
I think when you share the screen, I think you have to tell it that you want to share audio too.
share audio. Do you know where that is?
You can, when you share the screen, I had that problem before. You share the screen and at the, I think at the bottom, it showed that share audio. Yeah, that small thing. I miss it many times myself.
Oh,
Okay, I will see if I can try that this time. Thank you for the help. I appreciate it. Oh, Dawn, you're gonna try it?
no, go ahead. Sorry, let me get off of this. Uh-oh.
Okay.
You see, Julie, when you share the screen, toward the bottom, there has a box that says share or audio.
I'm looking for it, but I'm not. Oh, share sound. I just found it.
Yeah,
Thank-
yeah. Something like that.
Let me try to go back to the beginning of this. Hold on here.
Cry for the gods, cry for the people, cry for the land that was taken away. And then yet you'll find a way. Could you just imagine it? They came back and saw traffic lights and railroad tracks. How would they feel about this modern city life? Tears would come from each other's eyes, and they would start to realize that our land is in great, great danger now. All the fighting that the king had done to conquer all these islands, now there's condominiums. How would he feel if he saw a Venus? How would he feel? Would his smile be content and cry? Cry for the gods, cry for the people, cry for the land that was taken away. And then yet you'll find Hawaii. Wama, ke'ea o ka'aina, ikapono o Hawaii. Wama, e'ea o ka'aina.
Mahalo, Julie. Yes, Pili, this does break my heart. I swear, every time I see it, one feels the pain. So, but many of these projects I've worked on in the past, the conversations are getting harder, the issues are getting more difficult, the pain and the hurt is still there. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dawn Chang. My mother is Edna Ho'okano Shiroma. Her father was Kamiko Ho'okano. His father was Willie Ho'okano, and his mother was Louisa Cook, and his father was Iosepe Ho'okano. We are from the Ahupu of Kahalu'u on Oahu. My tutu is buried on our Kuleana lands, where our ohana grew lo'ikalo cultivation, and my ohana are lavaya from the Kaneohe Bay. So that's where I am from. So mahalo for the opportunity to be here. In my previous life, I was a Deputy Attorney General with the state, and I provided legal advice and counsel to DLNR. And I also provided counsel to the Board of Land and Natural Resources, the Water Commission, and the Island Burial Councils. What became painfully apparent was that most of the controversial and contentious projects that came before the Land Board that resulted in litigation were projects that the community heard for the first time at the board meeting when a decision was to be made. That obviously is too late for several reasons. One, the community is angry, feeling disrespected, and if they have financial resources, they will sue. Two, the decision makers, the Board of Land and Natural Resources or the Water Commission, are also angry because they end up making an unpopular decision one way or the other. Three, the project proponent is embroiled in litigation and the project is stalled with untimely cost delays. And four, the courts have to make a decision based upon a limited record, which may not necessarily reflect what may be in the best interest of the community, the applicant, or the land or the resources. The last two cases that I litigated before leaving the Attorney General's office was the Hokulia case in Kona that involved burial disturbance and development rights. And the second case was Oha versus State of Hawaii, involving whether the state could sell or transfer ceded lands. This case was ultimately decided by the US Supreme Court. In my view, these cases and many other issues involving culturally sensitive and contentious community issues are better resolved outside of litigation. As a result, I decided to open up a small niche practice that focuses on designing a proactive, culturally sensitive engagement process, especially for culturally sensitive issues and community contentious issues. And I try to design a process that genuinely engages the community in forms that are more conducive to the impacted communities, not just checking off of the box, to ensure that timely decisions are being made by both the applicant, the community, and the decision maker. Over the last 20 years, some of the culturally sensitive issues that I've been involved in, many were on those videos, include the development of the Comprehensive Management Plan for Mauna Kea Science Reserve in 2008. And recently, DLNR's independent assessment of the UH's implementation of that management plan that I completed in 2020. I also facilitated on behalf of the United States Department of Interior statewide public meetings on federal recognition of Native Hawaiians and the US government. Undoubtedly, these conversations were difficult and hard, but it was my honor and privilege to have worked on these issues. And many of the scenes in the videos are from those meetings. My role in these various issues were varied. For Mauna Kea, it was to design a community engagement process that sought to genuinely engage the community, especially the Native Hawaiian community in the process, as well as to have a team that could develop the management plan that was designed to preserve and protect cultural and natural resources. I truly believe that the CMP comprehensive management plan did provide management tools to effectively manage the cultural and natural resources on Mauna Kea. But what became apparent when we did the independent assessment was that the UH's implementation 12 years later, while we found that many of the management recommendations were implemented to protect the cultural and natural resources, the recommendations to genuinely engage the Native Hawaiian community on managing these resources on Mauna Kea were not implemented in the spirit that it was intended. Likewise, as for the US DOI public meetings, my role was to create a safe meeting environment that was respectful and fair. I recall in Keaukaha, in Kona, we had well over 500 people attending. It is very difficult to tell people you have 2 minutes to provide your testimony. It was painful, extremely painful, and it was really hard for me. But I believe that those who attended these meetings felt it was historic. For many of them, it was important to at least sign the registration to say that they attended these meetings. And it was like for many Hawaiians who recall the Kauai petitions during when the United States was considering annexing Hawaii, who objected to the annexation. Many of the Hawaiians who attended these public meetings felt it was important to at least sign up to be part of, to show that they attended these meetings. I am also a commissioner that sits on the Land Use Commission. I have seen projects that are enhanced when the project proponent proactively engages the community. But I've also seen the pain, the hurt, and the divisiveness when the project proponent is only checking off the box. I have learned more from the projects where I've been, I call it bus up. And these experiences have given me some tools and best management practices that I've tried to incorporate in my work. And I'd like to share some of those with you today. So now these practices, they are intended to try to avoid or at least minimize community conflicts. As I was sharing with Julie before we got on the call, I've been doing this probably I was a social worker with Queen Liliuokalani's Children's Center before I became a lawyer, doing community organizing. The issues for many are the same, but they're much harder. We live in a much more contentious society, limited resources. The disparity between the haves and have-nots are getting even broader. So it is much more difficult managing community engagement processes. But these are some of the tools that I have found to be very helpful. The first is respect. Show respect to the impacted communities by genuinely engaging them early on in the planning process, not just at the EIS or not just at a required public meeting or when the decision is being made. And it's not just checking off the box and going through the motion. Too often, controversial projects, even the most well-intended renewable energy or affordable housing project, disproportionately impact economically, culturally, and socially disenfranchised communities or adversely affect culturally sensitive areas. And over the years, I have found that at times, the hardest constituent is not the community. It is your client. Your client who may not be from Hawaii, who doesn't quite understand the cultural values or practices. Or it may be a government agency who has to weigh competing public interests. but they need to realize that they have public trust duties, constitutional obligations that require heightened consideration. So, but it is important. I find it to be, and communities find it to be disrespectful when you come in sort of after the fact, after decisions have been made, or appearance that decisions have been made, and you come in and you want to say, we're having a public meeting, please come and attend. By that time, they feel the decisions have been made. They feel that it doesn't matter what they say, you are going to do, or the project proponent or government is going to do whatever it can. And what I have found is that disrespect turns into mistrust, turns into contention and lack of civility. So when you are working on a project, engage early with the community. When your client is thinking about a project, like a government agency is thinking about doing something, they need to start to engage the community early on. Second point, it's not only engaging the community, but it's ongoing community engagement during the planning process, during the permitting process, during the construction and the maintenance process. Engagement should be collaborative, not just when you need something from them, like you go to the neighborhood board meeting or community association, so you can put on your application that you met with so-and-so. It has to be ongoing, far beyond when you get the permit approval. It is important to have follow-up. Many a times, what the communities feel like is you come to them because you want something. You want their approval, or you want to at least say that you met with the community. They raise issues, but nothing seems to be done. So I have found that it is really important to follow up, to make sure that you are keeping them informed of what's going on. In many instances, mistrust comes when there is a void of information. When you come in and you say, oh, we're proposing this project, and you have a public meeting. 2-3 years later, nothing happens, but they see bulldozers there, and you haven't said anything about what's going on. There needs to be an ongoing commitment to keeping communities informed. As you never know, for example, before the Land Use Commission, we are getting many projects that come back after they've gotten their approvals. And the communities have come to us and said, well, the project proponent had promised to do this and promised to do that. So they won't forget. So it is really important that if you want a successful, sustainable project, that you need to have ongoing commitments of communicating with your community. Because in many instances, in most instances, the consultants will leave the project, but the community and the project proponent or the landowner will continue to be there for years. And so we have an obligation when we're doing community engagement is to ensure that we are trying to develop trust and a long-term relationship with that community and that project developer, so that it sustains that project. That community should feel proud of that project, or at least to feel that it is part of the community. So ongoing community engagement. Follow up. Third point, utilize a variety of meeting forums depending on the constituencies. I utilize a lot of small talk stories, presentations to neighborhood boards, public forums, one-on-one, but it is usually my practice. My public meeting is usually one of the last meetings I'm having. I would have had a series of meetings leading up to that public meeting. Those series of meetings should meet with key leaders, should meet with families who have lineal and cultural connections to that land. You should be trying to identify what are the issues and concerns, so that by the time you have a community public meeting, you will have identified what those concerns are, and you will have tried to address them in a much more constructive way. When I did the Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan, I probably held over 200 individual small talk stories. Both Ken's Pancake House and Starbucks was going to start to charge me rent because I was there so often meeting with people on a one-on-one. But you know what? That is really showing respect. That before they hear about it in the public, that you have told them and they understand what's going on. You genuinely are interested in what their not always, what their thoughts are. So likewise, you know, have these small talk stories. What I have found is that kupuna, most local people do not feel comfortable coming up to a podium and saying what their concerns are. Not because they don't care, but probably because they have 2 jobs, they got to go home, feed their family, and they are just too busy. Meetings in the evening are not conducive to working people. A lot of times I will have meetings on the weekends, on a Saturday morning, and Zoom has really kind of changed the conversation. On one hand, it's created broader opportunities for engagement, but on the other hand, we've also lost that personal touch, sharing of food. That's really critical in Hawaii, that we share something. We also give a small makana, mahalo for their time, taking their time. But kupuna in particular, they don't feel comfortable coming to a public meeting and standing up in the front of the room and telling you how they feel. So we have to design a process that is conducive to genuinely engaging with them. That's what the law requires. It's not an opportunity to be heard, but it's a meaningful opportunity. So we need to engage, we need to design these processes that understand cultural differences, cultural ways in which they are more comfortable in communicating to one another, whether it's also multiple languages. But it is incumbent upon us, if we want to know their concerns, their comments, their mana'o, what are potential impacts, that we are convening meetings or talk stories that are convenient for them, not convenient for us. It is a lot more work, but I will tell you, it is more respectful, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it does avoid a lot of the mistrust. It avoids a lot of the hurt feelings. It avoids misunderstandings, but it enhances trust. It enhances the relationship, and more importantly, the respect. So like I said, generally the public meeting is probably the last meeting I'm having. And I will tell you, as someone who makes a decision at the Land Use Commission, or even when I was advising like the Board of Land and Natural Resources, we greatly appreciate it when the community comes in to support something versus the community is coming in to oppose something. But that only happens if there is a good engagement process prior to coming to that meeting. Okay. The 4th point, tool that I use, and this is really me as being a very good lawyer, it's you have to develop a really good administrative record. You have to document your community engagement process. Document the series of meetings that you've had, who you've met with, what their concerns have been, how you've addressed them. But you've got a good administrative record that can accompany both the application to the regulatory agency, or in the event of litigation, it accompanies, it's part of the filing that gets made. But it's also helps to ensure that you are capturing the institutional knowledge. Because a lot of times contention arises because, years later, what did they mean? What was this condition for? And if we don't have a really good administrative record documenting that, then we are trying to only interpret what those decision makers were thinking about and what was the basis of their decision. And in order to be respectful and honor those decisions, we have to know what was the basis of them. So having that administrative record, I have found to be extremely helpful. And it also helps to ensure that the communities, in Hawaiian, we have a kuleana. Kuleana is two ways. It is not only a right, it's a responsibility. And that goes not only for a project proponent or government, but community as well. That we all have a mutual responsibility to participate in them, to ensure that there is opportunities to participate in a meaningful way, in a timely way. And likewise, communities have a kuleana to participate in a timely way. Don't wait to the end, but participate when you have the opportunities. Okay. So, these are, as a lawyer and someone who does, much of my work is facilitation, but I do some mediation, but most of my work is facilitation. So, but these are advices that I give to my clients, and my clients, they are private developers in Waikiki, Kaka'ako, or there are government entities that are proposing to do projects. But I have, my advice to them is, you have to do more than the law requires. The law may require one public hearing for an EIS, but that's the minimum that you should be doing. Do more than checking out the box. Do more than, if you've got an application for an SMA, do more than, sending out notices to people around the property. I mean, the information needs to be meaningful if you want good comments. So it is important. And I've also found that there's an empowered community, rightly so. I think these communities have felt disenfranchised for a very long time. And I think for many of them, they've reached the point of enough is enough. And we see that percolating in a lot of different issues. So we all have to kind of do more than what is required. And I also tell my clients, you pay up front or you pay in the back end. Up front is really good community engagement. It's doing things in a proactive way. It's doing an archaeological inventory survey if one isn't even required. It's doing a very good ikahi analysis. So you're preserving and protecting cultural resources rather than mitigating for adverse effect. But those kinds of engagements pay off in the long run, because I will tell you, in the back end, it's a bitch. You get caught in a lawsuit, you get embroiled in litigation, you get embroiled in hurt feelings and project delays. And I think private developers, at least many of them, they exercise good business. They ultimately kind of quantify. They quantify it in costs. If I do this up front, will it save me money later? Because what they've realized is, if you find a burial today, you can make some changes. Versus if I find a burial when I'm in the midst of construction, I've got to stop and then I got to change. That's going to be extremely difficult. So I think government agents, private sector, they have been able to quantify the cost of untimely decisions. And likewise, I think government agencies, they're not as quick as private sector. They have, many different issues to kind of weigh. But I think it is much more important to invest in a good relationship with the community versus waiting until the very end. And if a dispute arises, call Julie. I mean, we don't use enough of alternative dispute resolution models. We don't offer communities and project proponents alternative ways to resolve issues. Government agencies, in many instances, they're just trying to keep their head above the water. So I think it is really important that if we can, and especially, for me as someone being in the legal profession, lawyers, we get involved in many times at the beginning, during the permitting, during the entitlement process, when a lawsuit gets filed. But those of us who are involved, and I think Melissa will talk about it from an urban planning perspective, planners like attorneys have the ability to counsel their clients to be more proactive in community engagement. But a lot of times they just don't know who do we talk to. So I think it is helpful that we are developing a repository of whether they are families, whether they're community leaders. But we need to, like I said, Kuleana goes two ways. We need to make this more accessible, but we also, again, I think finding alternative ways to resolving disputes rather than through litigation is much more constructive, not only from a cost perspective, but a long-term sustainability perspective. It is about relationships. Okay. The other thing that I have found is it is very helpful to have a third-party facilitator, someone who doesn't have a skin in the game, who can be objective, who can be, I always think of myself as I am the keeper of the process. I don't have to know everything substantively, but I am the keeper of the process. My job is to ensure that the process is fair and it is objective, it's transparent, and it's inclusive. So it is very helpful at times to have an independent third-party facilitator come in, especially when you are having a contentious issue, because you need to have sort of that person that's detached, not a government entity. It's very difficult to be an advocate and a facilitator. It's very hard to lose, to be viewed as unbiased. So, so with, someone asked me a question. If we do all these things, will that help? When doesn't it work? When doesn't a proactive community engagement process work? And what I have found, it's when the community perception becomes reality. When misinformation becomes the reality, it is very difficult to get people off their position. They are so entrenched and they are wedded primarily because it's an emotional attachment. So it's really hard to provide facts and objective information to reach a more constructive solution. So our job is to really try to find opportunities for resolution before that perception becomes the reality. So these are my final thoughts, and then we'll open up to questions. Ultimately, it's all about respect. It is about respect and relationships, respecting that community, because you are imposing something on them that they may not have asked for. And I was telling Julie, most of my work is on facilitating extremely contentious issues. As I age, I am choosing joy over contention. It really is very difficult. So we have an opportunity to choose civility through a proactive community engagement process over litigation and entrenched hardened positions. It will be harder. I mean, all of you work out in the community in different manners and fields, and you've all noticed it. It is much, much harder, and it's not going to get easier. I think the contention will get harder. So we have to find opportunities for interventions. And finally, and I can say this as a lawyer, lawyers need to get out of the way. Sometimes lawyers need to get out of the room and get out of the way, because our code of ethics requires us to be zealous advocates. Sometimes we don't need an advocate. Sometimes we need balance. And so there are times where I have just said, okay, lawyers, come out. We just want the parties in there. We just want the landowner and community members. And you guys see if you can find some meeting, some way of reaching something that you can agree to. Because sometimes it is really difficult when you have lawyers in the room. But other times you cannot, how would I say? It's really difficult to live without them. But I think that you are all here because obviously you care. You care about your communities, you care about the work that you do. So I applaud you. I wish you well. And I'm going to open it up for any questions that you may have now. And Julie's going to help me because I am not technically equipped, so I may not catch your hands up.
Okay, so first we're going to take an earlier question from the chat, and then I see Raju has his hand up. So
Okay.
Maribel is asking, how do you get to clients early enough? Any suggestions?
Make sure if you've got a good planner, if you've got a good if it's a private development, if you know what the development is, find a way to reach out. If it's a government agency, again, the neighborhood boards on the island of Oahu is a good way to sort of kind of get a preview of what's going to happen, so community members have an opportunity to be more proactive. But it is really hard unless the project proponent comes to you. It's hard to know what's going on. So I think you just have to have a really good network. You've got to try to be open and have your antennas up. But I would look, I'd check out the OEQC's bulletin. It tells you a lot of times what projects are coming up. If you see one that piques your interest because it's in your community, you may want to follow up. But unless you have some inside information, it's not always easy. So what you're hoping, and I think that there are many more socially conscious planners, lawyers, architects that are trying to encourage more proactive engagement. That's sort of my kind of response to that.
Okay, Raju?
Yes, thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for this discussion. Just a question. So I heard you say that it's hard to be an advocate and a facilitator. So does that mean basically that there's really no government agency that can settle disputes, international disputes? And if that's the case, Are there any international organizations that you find reputable? And I'll mute so I can listen.
Ultimately, I think the government agency or whoever the parties are, they will settle the dispute. But I think the facilitator helps to facilitate the process to get to the settlement of the dispute. I have found locally, it is very hard to have a government, for example, Department of Land and Natural Resources convening a public meeting on fishing regulations. I mean, they're advocating for those fishing regulations, but sometimes you need a third-party facilitator to help facilitate the discussion, because there are many people who may oppose the regulation. And some people may not even come to the meeting because it's being held by a government agency. So I think my point was that it is helpful sometimes where you have a large public meeting and you're anticipating that it will be contentious. Rather than having a member of the government entity trying to moderate or facilitate that meeting, it is generally much more productive to bring in a third-party facilitator. I hope that makes sense, Raju.
Yes, thank you so much. Mahalo. That's really helpful.
No, and I called Julie. I think there's also a lot of good organizations. In addition to what she does, other organizations that can help you find the appropriate facilitator. Because you also want to have a facilitator that may be appropriate to that particular issue or concern or constituency.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, concerns?
Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you
How are
for a
you?
really interesting presentation.
Thank you very
Besides
much.
the obvious of the change in terms of us being able to be together physically, have you seen a change in the community, I guess I'd say attitude or frustration levels since COVID started? So do you see a difference pre-COVID and during COVID? Thank you so much for a great presentation.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. That's a really good question and a good point. Pre-COVID, we generally saw people who would at least, and I will share from sitting as a land use commissioner, as well as doing some of this outreach myself. It was usually the impacted communities that we would see participating in either the public meeting or the forum. But with COVID, we're seeing a much broader participation of people beyond just that impacted community. So there are challenges and there are benefits to that. I'm always of the view that, and this comes kind of from a cultural perspective, but also social, a social and an environmental perspective. The impacted community, those that are closest to the area, there really should be, those people should be engaged in. They know that community best. They're the ones who are going to feel if there's traffic impacts or if there's noise or whatever the impacts may be. But many of these other issues go far beyond that impacted community. So the Zoom has created opportunities for broader participation. But I think it also requires now greater effort to bring out the people from that impacted community, because I think, and I guess this is for me, there's always a challenge in how do you weigh the different voices that you're hearing. And so, and that's become a challenge to me as a result of COVID. Because we're seeing a broader participation of community, are those comments reflective of the community that's being impacted? So I am making sure that I am asking project proponents, or in the work that I do, taking greater, taking extra efforts to empower, to hear the voices of that impacted community, because they may not be heard as much as before. So that's, that's to me, that's the pre-COVID and the post-COVID is we got more people participating, but do we have always the right people participating? So I think we have to do, we have to kind of adjust our engagement process to make sure that we are hearing the voices of all those constituencies and putting them in the right context. I hope that makes sense, Elizabeth. Mahalo for the question.
Who else would like to put something in the chat or raise their hand or unmute themselves?
Oh, what a great group. Okay, good. And as I've shared with Julie, okay, I see Bill Stormont. Is that you, Bill?
Yes, Dawn, good to see you. Aloha.
Hey, aloha. Aloha, no.
I have been part of the long range planning steering committee that the County of Hawaii and the Island of Hawaii Visitors Bureau put together for Waipio Valley. As that was getting launched, the county elected to close Waipio Valley Road. You may have heard about it.
Yes.
Back in February. And it's been mired in a lot of unrest there at Waipio. And I'm curious if you have been following it at all, what recommendations you may have for moving forward for the long range planning steering committee. The road closure and the steering committee are two separate things, but they're inextricably linked because of the timing of all of this. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what might be a good way to move forward, particularly with the long range planning aspect of what we're going to do at Waipio with respect to the visitor public, the community there, very deep-seated feelings about the conflict there. It's been identified as a hotspot in the Destination Management Action Plan that the Hawaii Tourism Authority put together for Hawaii Island. So any thoughts along those lines?
No, mahalo. I have been sort of keeping abreast of it from afar, what I've read, but I think Waipio is Haena, it's Hana, it's Kahuku, it's Waimanalo. I mean, I think it is symptomatic of communities who have a treasured, especially cultural resource. I remember one of the first cases that I had as a deputy AG was involving a Waipio, a lo'ikalo. You had longtime Kuleana families who owned a lo'ikalo, and someone from outside, someone from the mainland bought a piece of property inside Waipio Valley and said, oh, you cannot harvest your lo'i, you cannot, that taro belongs to me. But what they failed to recognize is that traditionally and culturally, that stream meandered, right? But everybody in the valley understood where their kuleanas were, and they all had respect for that. So I think fast forward, you have competing interests. And I think like with Haena, I think the flooding provided them an opportunity, as did COVID, to take a pause, to do that long-term planning, to have that community participate. What is the plans for Haena? And likewise, I mean, I see that happening with Waipio, that you have an opportunity to take that pause, and part of that is, it's sort of all or nothing. It's maybe reaching out to those families who are from there, and then broadening the circles to a broader community. but I think it is, I was a little surprised when the county said that they were going to permit sort of limited traversing down into the valley. And so I think it wasn't unexpected that you had that response. So I think that there is and to me, this is a process issue. If the long-term planning process is we're going to look at Waipio Valley in the long run, water management, then that also means having those engagements. It is hearing those voices before you start permitting people to come back in. So I guess that's kind of my perception that I see, is that there is county says we're committed to long-term planning, but in the interim, we're going to let this, we're going to sort of let some level of activity back in. That's sort of having, in my view, kind of an inconsistent message with that community. So maybe it is like what Hyanna did, is they took that pause as a way for the community to get, and the families to develop with DLNR, that long-term planning, before they actually permitted access to reoccur. So you might want to think about a process like that to avoid, because one thing you don't want to get into is, like I said, when the perception becomes reality and contention is so entrenched and it becomes almost physical. So I think you have a chance to reassess moving forward by seriously taking this pause. If that makes sense, Bill?
Oh, it makes very good sense, Dawn. Thank you. I appreciate that. I took notes, and so I'm looking down the list of what you said the steps ought to be. And unfortunately, they weren't able to, because of the haste. Some of the steps that you suggest were not able to be followed, and so we're kind of the county and the landowners there are now needing to try to address that and revisit it. With my DLNR hat on, we are clearly a participant, but not a leader in this particular effort. We don't have any land. We have, the only kuleana we have is that it's access through that property to get to the public charge lands that we're responsible for in the public access. So it's a challenging one. I'm watching and trying to mind my P's and Q's and not throw in too heavily, because it's not necessarily our direct kuleana.
Yes.
So,
But this is one where timely intervention is really critical.
Yeah.
I think that, and you have the opportunity, I think there is an opportunity that has presented itself to bring all those stakeholders to the table to talk about this before it becomes too divisive.
Yeah.
As well as it can become, obviously this is not going to be the first or the last, or so this can be a really nice model for future engagement processes on sensitive lands, access, and protection of resources.
yeah, it's good. And we do have, you mentioned Hyanna and the Wainapanapa also.
Yeah.
Those present some good models
They
to
do.
build on, but
Right.
things are very tender and sensitive right now. The problem is that the longer it goes, the parties involved become more emboldened and more, it's not the word I need, but they're more enabled as time goes by.
And because they're filling up the void with information that's, may not necessarily be what may be in the best. So, I mean, somebody got to get in there and have leadership and just say, okay, time out.
That's the word. That's the word. Thank you. Too much time on that subject. I appreciate it though.
No.
Hello, everybody.
I wish you well.
Yeah, and Rachel's part of it too. So Rachel, throw in, going.
Yeah, so before we move on, I just want to acknowledge that it is slightly past the time we're supposed to end. Dawn is willing to stay on for a few more minutes. So if any of you do need to leave, we want to thank you very much for being with us today. Do take a few minutes to fill out our short online survey, which helps with our grant funding. I've put the link in the chat a couple times. Please check your emails this week. I will be sending you a video link and the eval form link if you can't use the one that's online. And then I do see a question from Sonia in the chat, and then Rachel also has her hand up. So we can stay on for maybe 5-10 more minutes if we want to do that. So why don't we go to Sonia? She had her question a little earlier. She asked, have you worked on the cocoa palm issue of Kauai with a local community? Has anyone reached out to you about that issue? Are you familiar with it?
Sonia, mahalo. Yeah, I mean, I am familiar, but I've not worked on it, and nobody has reached out to me. Do you have a particular question about that? Oh, unmute yourself.
In that case, I'm going to recommend Fern Holland, who is running for the council, and she's the organizer, the head of the organization that negotiating with the new owner of cocoa palm, so how to resolve the issue.
Yeah. Are you talking about resolving the title issue, the title issue, or
what to do with the property? You know, the new owner still wants to build a hotel there, and there is a permit, and the local community is trying to ask the council to revoke that permit.
Yeah, that my recollection is a lot of that is kind of hits start and stops. Yeah, because I think that I don't think they're really engaging the community. I think that, you know, a developer or landowner comes up with an idea, and then they come and they say, okay, this is what we're planning to do. And it may be more helpful to take a pause and sit down and say, you know, to sort of open up an open talk start and ask the community, well, what is it that you're interested in seeing happening here?
Yeah. I totally agree with you that it's better to resolve this with facilitation rather than litigation. You know?
Yes. Yeah, they've had more than enough litigation.
Right. Right.
All right, mahalo.
Mahalo, thank you so much for excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Rachel?
Thank you, Dawn. Rachel Kayama, the Hawaii Island Visitor Bureau, and I just wanted to follow up with Bill's comments. You know, this has been a really great case study for community engagement work that I have done through the Island Hawaii Visitor Bureau. And our role there has been just to encourage the community to come together and to discuss opportunities for a regenerative tourism and stewardship modeling for the Wahipana. And so we have been in the community engaging them with the LNR and the county. So I just wanted to, I appreciate your comments. I think it's very complicated down there because it represents multiple communities. It's just, you know, not only the lineal descended, but the surfers, the landowners, you know, so this is a really interesting case study to watch as it evolves. I'm confident that leaders from the community will emerge though. And I believe that they will come to the table again together. It might take a while, but I really feel that this is gonna happen there. So I really appreciate any comments you get for us as we continue to work within this community. I'm a Waimea born raised girl. I'm from Waimea originally, so I grew up and we were always invited by our neighbors to go down and help with the taro patch cleaning and things like that. But I know how dangerous that road is. So, you know, I'm sure the mayor made the best judgment he knew on what to do about the road until the courts decided, hey, no, that's illegal because you cannot just close the roads down, you know, like that. So I think now they're trying to come back and amend this and try to work with the communities, and hopefully there's going to be resolution in the long run. That's what we hope.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Rachel. I mean, I think this is, sometimes I have found where you have various stakeholders, that it is helpful for the stakeholders to have, how would I say, rather than bringing everybody together, it's really sort of permitting them a safe space to speak amongst themselves first, and then you bring everybody together. Because sometimes, you know, it's not real clear who speaks for who. And when you have a larger public meeting, there are some people that feel more comfortable speaking up than others, but that doesn't mean that those constituents don't have their own one also. I have tried, sometimes I have found to create, for me to better understand what those issues are, it is to meet with them separately first, identify what those issues are, identify what, you know, who are the key stakeholders, and then bring people together. So at least that they have a space to share without having to compete with other stakeholders. So, you know, for example, bringing together the families who have kuleana down there, bringing together the recreational users, bringing together the, you know, the tour companies, but they all have their own list of priorities and issues. And then at least you can identify, because for me, it is really helpful to start. So what is it that we share in common? And sometimes when you have everybody in the room, it's hard to identify what we share in common versus you doing the heavy lifting by meeting with them and saying, okay, I met with everybody, and it seems like we have at least this in common. Everybody wants to preserve and protect the unique cultural, you know, environment of Waipio Valley. They want to access it. So, so sometimes I think it's helpful to design a process where you are hearing various stakeholder groups' interests and concerns amongst themselves first, trying to find what it is they have in common, what brings, you know, what is the common thread. And sometimes it can be a person that's a common thread, somebody who's able to navigate all those different worlds. I don't know. It's either a person, or it could be an issue, or a particular, you know, some value. But sometimes there's just too much noise, too much distractions. So it's good to have a safe space where you're just talking with like-minded stakeholders, finding what they have in common, all the groups have in common, and then bringing them together.
Yeah, that is like key for all of us, I think, is to, if there's a lot of stakeholders, to meet with them individually.
Yeah.
Finding common ground, that's super key. And I appreciate that so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I wish you well. I mean, Waipio is an extremely very valuable and a significant resource. So mahalo to your good work. All right. Any
Well,
last? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, maybe we can let you go, because I know you have a 2 o'clock, unless there's someone else that has something burning that we could handle very quickly.
All right. Okay.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you so much, Dawn. We really appreciate you being with us today and giving so much of your time and sharing your mana'o with you. I got to see Dawn at a conference, Access to Justice conference, and I asked her and Melissa, who were on a panel, do you want to come get talk for me? You both have such great things to say. So come see Melissa next month, and thank you for being here today. Thank you, Dawn. We really appreciate your
Mahalo, everyone.
participation.
Ahoy ho. Ahoy ho.
Hello, John.